AI Fluency in 30 Days, What 99% of People Get Wrong. Most people using AI right now are doing it completely wrong. And I don't mean they are bad at it. I mean they are approaching it from the wrong direction entirely. They're treating AI like a search engine when it's actually a prediction engine. They're asking it questions like it stores answers when it generates responses on the fly. They are frustrated because they type one sentence and expect magic, then blame the tool when they get mediocre results. Here's the thing. The gap between people who understand how to use AI and those who don't is widening fast. But it's not because AI is complicated. It's because most people never learn the basics. They skip straight to the tools without understanding the logic. They Google top 50 AI apps, download 10 of them, and wonder why nothing clicks. I've spent over 2 decades working in technology. I've watched every major shift. The internet, mobile, cloud computing, social media. And I can tell you with certainty that AI is different. It's not just another tool. It's a fundamental shift in how we process information and solve problems. The people who understand this early are building an unfair advantage. The people who don't are falling further behind every single week. This audiobook is different. I'm giving you a 30-day system to go from AI confused to AI fluent. Not by collecting more tools. Not by memorizing prompts. But by learning how AI actually thinks, then building skills that compound. By the end of 30 days, you'll write better prompts than 99% of people. You'll know how to steer AI toward expert-level outputs instead of generic garbage. And you'll understand when to trust it and when to push back. Later, I'll give you the 2-minute version you can use today. But for now, just listen. There's a toolkit in the description with all the frameworks, prompts, and a 7-day checklist. You can grab it when you're ready. No need to pause or take notes right now. This is for people who want practical skills, not hype. If you're looking for someone to tell you AI will solve all your problems, this isn't it. If you want to understand how the tool works so you can actually use it well, keep listening. And here's what I need you to understand right from the start. You're not behind. Not yet. The window is still open. Most people are still figuring this out. Most companies are still experimenting. Most industries haven't standardized how they use these tools. That means if you commit to learning this properly over the next 30 days, you can leapfrog years of trial and error that other people are going through right now. Let's start with the biggest mistake people make. They talk to AI like it's human. And that's killing their results. The problem: you're speaking the wrong language. AI doesn't understand your words the way a person does. It predicts them. Think about it this way. If I said Humpty Dumpty sat on a, your brain immediately knows the next word is probably wall. You're not searching a database of nursery rhymes. You're predicting based on patterns you've seen before. That's what your brain does automatically. It fills in the blank before you consciously think about it. Or here's another example. Type Humpty Dumpty sat on a into Google and watch it autocomplete. It suggests wall before you finish typing. Why? Because Google has seen millions of searches. It knows the pattern. It's giving you the most probable completion based on what other people have searched before. AI works the same way, except it doesn't have intuition. It has math. When you type a sentence into an AI model, it breaks your text into smaller chunks called tokens. Each token is a word or part of a word. Humpty is probably one token. Dumpty is another. Sat is another. Wall is another. Then the model converts each token into a list of numbers. These numbers are called vectors. And those vectors get placed into a massive mathematical space called an embedding space. In that space, similar ideas live close together. The word Humpty lives close to egg and wall and fall. It lives far from motorcycle or chocolate. The model has learned these relationships from the millions of texts it was trained on. It doesn't know what an egg is the way you do. It just knows that egg and Humpty tend to appear near each other in similar contexts. When it's time to generate an answer, the model looks at the context and predicts the most likely next token. So when it sees Humpty Dumpty had a great, it weighs all the possible next words. Humpty Dumpty had a great party. Humpty Dumpty had a great day. Humpty Dumpty had a great chocolate. It calculates probabilities for each option and sees that 4 is the most likely outcome. The line gets generated not from memory, not from stored facts, but from probability and proximity. That's why AI can feel so smart but also so alien. It's completing patterns, not thinking. It's predicting based on what it's seen before, not reasoning from first principles. This is why vague prompts produce vague results. When your input is fuzzy, the model has too many probable paths. It guesses. And the guess is usually mediocre because mediocre outputs are the most common in its training data. Think about it. Most writing is average. Most advice is generic. Most answers are safe and obvious. The model has been trained on all of that. So when you don't give it specific direction, it defaults to the statistical center. And the center is boring. If you want sharp answers, you need to give AI sharp direction. You need to speak its language. I call this machine English. It's not about being robotic. It's about being clear, structured, and specific in a way that helps the model compute your intent instead of guessing at it. Most people type things like, "Help me with my resume." That's a signal with no boundaries. The model doesn't know if you want formatting tips, content edits, or a total rewrite. It doesn't know your industry, your experience level, or what job you're targeting. It doesn't know if you're trying to land your first job or pivot to a new field or negotiate for a promotion. So it defaults to the average. And average is useless. Or someone will type, "Write me a marketing email." Okay. An email for what? To who? Selling what? What's the goal? A cold outreach email to a CEO is completely different from a nurture email to an existing customer. The model doesn't know which one you want. So it gives you something that could apply to either. Which means it's specific to neither. Here's what I want you to understand. You are not broken if AI isn't working for you. The system is misaligned. You're trying to speak to a prediction machine in human language, and the prediction machine is doing its best with incomplete information. Once you fix that misalignment, everything changes. The people who are getting amazing results from AI right now aren't smarter than you. They're not more technical. They just learned how to communicate in a way the model can process. And that's a skill you can build in 30 days. The framework, AIM. There's a simple structure I use for almost every prompt I write. I call it AIM. 3 parts. Actor, input, mission. Actor means you tell the model who it's acting as. You give it a persona, a role, a lens through which to generate the response. This matters because the model has learned patterns from millions of different contexts. If you say act as a lawyer, it pulls from legal language patterns. If you say act as a 5-year-old, it simplifies. If you say act as a seasoned marketing executive, it uses business terminology and strategic thinking. The actor steers the tone, the depth, and the style. And this isn't just theater. When you assign a role, you're actually narrowing the probability distribution. You're telling the model which parts of its training data to prioritize. A prompt that starts with "You are a world-class copywriter" will pull from different linguistic patterns than one that starts with "You are a technical documentation specialist." Same underlying model, different output. Input means you give the model the context and data it needs. This is where most people fail. They assume the model knows what they are talking about. It doesn't. If you're asking it to review your resume, attach the resume. If you want advice on a specific problem, describe the problem in detail. If you're asking for marketing ideas, provide information about your product, your audience, and your goals. The more context you provide, the less the model has to guess. Think of it this way. The model is like a consultant you just hired. If you walk into a meeting and say, "Fix my business," the consultant has no idea where to start. But if you say, "Our customer churn rate is 15% per month, our average customer lifetime value is $500, and we're trying to reduce churn to under 10% in the next quarter," now the consultant has something to work with. Same thing with AI. Give it the data. Mission means you tell the model exactly what you want it to do. Not vaguely. Specifically. Don't say, "Improve this." Say, "Rewrite this for clarity and cut it by 30%. Don't say, "Help me brainstorm." Say, "Generate 5 ideas, rank them by feasibility, and tell me which one to try first." Don't say make this better. Say restructure this email to lead with the value proposition, include 2 specific examples, and end with a clear call to action. The clearer your mission, the better the output. Here's an example. Most people would type something like fix my resume. That's not a prompt. That's a wish. Here's how you'd structure it with I'm actor. You are an expert resume editor who has reviewed thousands of resumes that led to interviews at top companies in finance and technology. You understand what hiring managers look for and how to make measurable impact stand out. You know how to structure a resume so the most important information hits in the first 10 seconds. Input: I'm attaching my resume and a job description for a senior product manager role at a fintech startup. I have 6 years of experience in product management, mostly at mid-size companies, and I'm trying to transition into a faster-paced, high-growth environment. My strengths are in user research and roadmap prioritization, but I haven't worked directly in financial technology before. Mission: review my resume against this job description. Give me a bullet list of 10 specific edits that will improve clarity, highlight measurable outcomes, and align my experience with what this role requires. Focus on making my impact obvious in the first 10 seconds of reading. For each suggestion, tell me what to change and why it matters. See the difference? You've told the model who it is, what it's working with, and what you need. The response won't be generic. It'll be targeted. That's machine English. If you're driving or working out right now, just keep listening. The toolkit in the description has this entire framework written out so you can reference it later. You don't need to memorize anything. You just need to understand the pattern. Now let's get into the tools you'll use over the next 30 days. Tool 1. Pick one model and go deep. Here's what most people do. They hear about AI. They Google best AI tools. They see a list of 50 options. They try 5 of them for 10 minutes each. They get overwhelmed. They quit. That's backwards. You don't learn AI by collecting tools. You learn it by mastering one tool deeply. Because the skills you build with one model transfer to all the others. It's like learning an instrument. If you've never played music before and you spend a week on drums, a week on guitar, a week on piano, you'll be terrible at all 3. But if you spend a month on drums, you learn rhythm, timing, and practice discipline. When you pick up guitar later, it's easier. Your brain already knows how to learn music. There's actually research on this. A study published in Frontiers in Psychology found that drummers pick up guitar faster than complete beginners, even though drumming doesn't involve melody and requires completely different physical skills. Why? Because their brains are trained to recognize patterns, maintain timing, and practice deliberately. The specific instrument matters less than the underlying learning process. AI is the same. The deeper you go with one model, the faster you'll understand all the others. Because they all work on the same principles. They all use tokens, probabilities, and context. They all benefit from clear prompts. They all struggle with vague instructions. Once you learn how to structure prompts, debug outputs, and iterate effectively with one tool, you can apply those skills anywhere. So which one do you pick? It doesn't matter as much as you think. If you want the most widely used option with the largest community and the most tutorials, pick ChatGPT. If you're already deep in the Google ecosystem and you use Gmail, Google Docs, and Google Calendar, try Gemini because it integrates with those tools. If you want something built specifically for work and complex projects, use Claude. But really, any of them will work. The goal is not to find the perfect tool. The goal is to build fluency with one tool so you stop guessing and start controlling the output. For the first week, your job is simple. Use one model every single day. Ask it questions. Write prompts. Play with the AIM framework. See how it responds when you're vague versus when you're specific. Notice what makes the output better. Test its limits. Push it until it breaks, then figure out why. You're not trying to become an expert yet. You're trying to feel the rhythm. And here's what's going to happen. In the first few days, you'll feel clumsy. Your prompts will be too long or too short. The outputs will be hit or miss. You'll second-guess yourself. That's normal. You're learning a new language. But by day 5 or 6, something clicks. You start to predict what the model will do. You start to recognize patterns in how it responds. You develop instincts. And once you have those instincts, everything accelerates. Let me give you a concrete example of what this looks like in practice. Let's say you're using ChatGPT to help you write a weekly newsletter. In the first week, you might type something like "write a newsletter about productivity." The output will be generic. It'll have sections on time management and goal setting and maybe some bullet points about morning routines. It's not terrible, but it's not specific to your audience or your voice. It could be anyone's newsletter. By week 2, after practicing AIM and MAP, you'd approach it differently. You'd say you are an expert newsletter writer who specializes in actionable productivity content for busy professionals. You've studied the top newsletters in this space and understand what makes content shareable versus what gets ignored. Here's my audience profile: 30 to 45-year-old managers and directors who are overwhelmed by meetings and email. They value their time. They want concrete tactics, not theory. Here are my last 3 newsletters for reference. Now write a 400-word newsletter on productivity. Focus on one specific tactic they can implement this week. Use a conversational tone. Start with a relatable problem. End with a concrete next step. The output from that second prompt will be dramatically better. It'll feel customized. It'll match your voice because you gave examples. It'll speak to your specific audience because you described them. It'll be actionable because you told it to focus on one tactic with a next step. That's the power of going deep with one model. You start to understand what it needs from you. Here's a 7-day experiment for Tool 1. Each day, spend 15 minutes with your chosen model. Day 1, ask it to explain something you already understand and see if the explanation is clear. This gives you a baseline. Day 2, give it a task with 0 context and watch it struggle. Notice how generic the output is. Day 3, give it the same task with full context using AIM and compare the results. The difference will be dramatic. Day 4, ask it to rewrite something you wrote and critique the output. Be harsh. Figure out what it got right and what it missed. Day 5, use it to brainstorm 5 ideas on a problem you're facing. Evaluate the ideas. Are they surface level or do they show depth? Day 6, take one of those ideas and ask the model to help you plan the first step. Make it concrete. Day 7, reflect on what changed between day 1 and today. Write it down. The common failure mode here is tool hopping. You try ChatGPT, then you hear about Claude, so you switch. Then someone mentions Gemini, so you try that. You're always starting from scratch. You never build momentum. Stop. Pick one. Commit for 30 days. You can explore others later. Right now, depth beats breadth. If this approach is making sense so far, do me a favor. Hit subscribe, tap the like button, and turn on notifications. It helps other people find this content. And if you know someone who's frustrated with AI, share this with them. They'll thank you. Tool 2, build context with MAP. You've picked your model. You're using AIM to structure prompts. Now let's talk about what actually makes your outputs intelligent. Context. The smartest AI in the world will sound clueless if you don't give it enough information to work with. Every answer it generates depends entirely on how well it understands the question. If you ask it something vague with no background, it has nothing to anchor to. It guesses. And the guess will be generic because generic is the statistical average of all the data it was trained on. Context is the map that tells the model where to look and what matters. Without context, you're asking it to navigate a billion data points blindly. With context, you're giving it landmarks, constraints, and direction. I use an acronym for this too. MAP. Memory, assets, actions, prompt. Memory is the conversation history. Most AI models can remember what you said earlier in the same chat session. If you've been talking with the model for 10 minutes, it remembers the context from your previous messages. That memory is context. It helps the model build on previous ideas instead of starting fresh every time. But here's the catch. If you start a new chat, that memory is gone. The model has no idea what you discussed yesterday. So if you're working on something complex over multiple sessions, you have 2 options. Either keep the same thread going and don't start a new chat, or start each new session by summarizing what you discussed before. That builds continuity. It reminds the model where you left off. Assets are the files, documents, or data you attach to the prompt. If you're asking the model to analyze your budget, attach the spreadsheet. If you want feedback on a draft, paste the draft into the chat. If you're asking for marketing advice, provide your product description, your target audience, and any data you have on past campaigns. Don't assume the model knows what you're talking about. It doesn't. It only knows what you give it. The more assets you include, the more grounded the output becomes. It's the difference between asking, "How do I improve my website?" and saying, "Here's my website traffic data for the past 6 months, here's my conversion funnel, here's feedback from 5 users. Now help me identify the biggest bottleneck." Actions are the tools the model can use to do work beyond generating text. Some models can search the web. Some can write code and execute it. Some can access your files if you've given permission. Some can integrate with other software. These actions extend what the model can do. If you're asking a question that requires current information, make sure the model has access to search. If you're asking it to analyze data, make sure it can run code or process spreadsheets. If you need information from a specific document, make sure the model can access that document. Actions turn the model from a text generator into a problem solver. Prompt is the instruction itself. This is where AIM comes in. The better your prompt, the better the model understands what you're asking. But the prompt alone isn't enough. You need memory, assets, and actions to give the model the full picture. Here's an example. Let's say you want help planning a marketing campaign for a new product. A weak prompt would be, "Give me marketing ideas." That's not enough context. The model doesn't know your product, your audience, your budget, your timeline, or your goals. It'll give you generic ideas that could apply to anything. A strong prompt using MAP would look like this. Memory: we talked last week about positioning this product for remote workers who need better focus tools. You suggested emphasizing the science behind the product and targeting productivity communities. Assets: here's the product spec, our target customer profile based on surveys we ran, and data from our pilot launch showing which features people use most. Actions: search for recent trends in productivity marketing and see what competitors are doing. Prompt: using this information, generate 5 campaign ideas. For each idea, include the core message, the primary channel, the estimated timeline, and one potential risk we should plan for. See how much richer that is? You've given the model memory to build on, assets to ground its thinking, actions to pull in current data, and a clear prompt to guide the output. The result won't be generic. It'll be specific to your situation. It'll reference your product details. It'll account for your audience. It'll feel custom. The 7-day experiment for Tool 2 is this. Day 1, ask the model a question with 0 context and note the result. It'll probably be shallow. Day 2, ask the same question but include one asset like a document or a summary. See how the output improves. Day 3, add memory by referencing something you discussed earlier in the thread. Day 4, enable an action like web search or code execution and see how the output changes. Day 5, combine all 3, memory, assets, and actions in one prompt. This is where it gets powerful. Day 6, compare Day 1's output to Day 5's output side by side. The difference should be obvious. Day 7, write down what you learned about the role of context. Make it specific. What worked? What didn't? The failure mode here is assuming the model knows more than it does. It doesn't know your life, your work, or your goals. It doesn't know what happened in your meeting yesterday or what your boss said or what your customers are complaining about. It only knows what you tell it. Feed it context and it gets smarter. Starve it of context and it stays shallow. Midpoint Recap. Let's pause for a second and recap where we are. You've learned that AI doesn't understand language the way humans do. It predicts it. That's why vague prompts produce vague outputs. You've learned the AIM framework: actor, input, mission. That's how you structure prompts so the model computes your intent instead of guessing. You've picked one model and committed to going deep instead of hopping between tools. And you've learned the MAP framework: memory, assets, actions, prompt. That's how you build the context that makes outputs intelligent instead of generic. If you only do one thing from this audiobook, do this. Use M every time you write a prompt. Tell the model who it is, give it the information it needs, and state exactly what you want. That alone will put you ahead of 90% of people using AI. I'm not exaggerating. Most people never learn this. They type one-sentence prompts and wonder why the outputs are mediocre. You'll pass that now. But we're not stopping there. The second half of this audiobook is about refinement. You're going to learn how to debug your thinking when outputs are weak, how to steer the model toward expertise instead of accepting generic answers, how to verify outputs so you don't get fooled by confident-sounding nonsense, and how to develop taste so your work doesn't sound like everyone else's copy-pasted garbage. Keep listening. The toolkit is there when you need it, but right now, let's keep building skills. We're halfway through the 30 days, and this is where it starts to compound. Tool 3. Debug your thinking. Here's a truth most people don't want to hear. When the AI gives you a bad answer, the problem is almost never the AI. It's your prompt. I know that's annoying. You want the tool to just work. But AI is not magic. It's math. It's a probability engine that generates outputs based on the inputs you give it. If your input is unclear, the output will be unclear. If your input is shallow, the output will be shallow. If you're not getting what you need, the first question should always be, what did I ask for, and was it specific enough? Most people don't debug their thinking. They type a prompt, get a weak answer, and blame the model. Then they try again with slightly different wording and get another weak answer. Then they give up. That's not prompting. That's guessing. And guessing doesn't improve over time. Prompting is iterating. It's a loop. You write a prompt. You evaluate the output. You identify what went wrong. You adjust the prompt based on what you learned. You try again. The goal is not to get it perfect on the first try. Nobody does. The goal is to learn what the model needs from you so that over time, your first try gets better and better. And here's what happens when you iterate deliberately. You start to recognize patterns. You notice that when you're too vague, the model defaults to generic advice. You notice that when you don't give examples, the output stays abstract. You notice that when you ask open-ended questions, the model hedges instead of committing. These patterns become instincts. And once you have those instincts, you write better prompts without thinking about it. There are 3 patterns I use when I'm debugging a weak output. The first is the chain of thought pattern. When the model gives me an answer that seems off, I ask it to show its reasoning. I'll say something like, think step by step and show your work before giving me the final answer. This forces the model to break down its logic instead of jumping straight to a conclusion. And often, when you see the steps, you can spot where it went wrong. Maybe it misunderstood part of your question. Maybe it made an assumption you didn't intend. Maybe it conflated 2 different concepts. Once you see the chain of thought, you can correct it. You can say your third step assumes X, but actually Y is true. Try again with that correction. The second pattern is the verifier pattern. Instead of trying to fix the prompt myself, I ask the model to help. I'll say, ask me 3 clarifying questions that would help you give a better answer. Ask them one at a time. The model will respond with questions that reveal what information it's missing. You answer those questions, and then the model has more context to work with. This turns the interaction into a conversation instead of a one-shot transaction. It also teaches you what kind of information the model needs for this type of task. Over time, you start including that information upfront. The third pattern is the refinement pattern. I'll say, before answering my question, propose 2 sharper versions of it. Tell me which one you think is better and why. The model will rewrite your prompt in a way that's clearer or more specific. You pick the version you prefer, and then the model answers based on that refined prompt. Essentially, you're teaching the model how to ask the right questions so it can give the right answer. This is incredibly useful when you're not sure how to articulate what you want. The model helps you clarify your own thinking. These patterns sound simple, but they are incredibly powerful. Because they force you to slow down and think about what you're actually asking. Most people rush. They want instant results. But the fastest way to get good results is to iterate deliberately. Test, tweak, tune. Push the model until you understand why something works and why something doesn't. Here's the 7-day experiment for Tool 3. Day 1. Write a prompt and get a weak answer. Don't revise it yet. Just note what's wrong with the output. Be specific. Is it too vague? Too generic? Missing key details? Day 2. Use the chain of thought pattern and ask the model to show its reasoning. Read through the steps and identify where it went off track. Day 3. Use the verifier pattern and let the model ask you clarifying questions. Answer them and see how the output improves. Day 4. Use the refinement pattern and have the model rewrite your prompt. Compare the original to the refined version. Day 5. Combine all 3 patterns in one session and iterate until the output is strong. This might take several rounds. That's fine. You're learning the loop. Day 6. Go back to day 1's prompt and rewrite it using everything you've learned this week. Generate a new output and compare it to the original. Day 7. Write down what changed in your approach. What do you understand now that you didn't understand on day 1? The failure mode here is expecting perfection on the first try. That's not how this works. Even experts iterate. The difference is they iterate faster because they've built instincts. You're building those instincts right now. Give it time. Tool 4. Steer to experts. When you ask an AI model a question, you're not searching a database. You're sampling from a probability distribution. That distribution includes millions of ideas the model has learned during training. Some of those ideas are brilliant. Some are average. Some are flat wrong. And some are completely made up. If you ask a vague question like how do I make my team more innovative, the model will pull from the middle of that distribution. It'll give you generic advice. Brainstorm more. Encourage creativity. Foster psychological safety. Create space for experimentation. You'll read it and think, yeah, I already knew that. Because you did. The model defaulted to the most common answers because you didn't give it any reason to go deeper. Here's how you fix that. You steer the model away from the middle and toward the edges. You direct it toward experts, frameworks, and depth. Instead of asking, how do I make my team more innovative, you ask, explain how to make my team more innovative using ideas from Pixar's Brain Trust model, principles from high-performing creative teams at IDEO, and research from Harvard Business Review on psychological safety and risk-taking. Now the model is pulling from more specific, higher-quality sources. The output won't be generic. It'll be informed. And here's the thing. You don't need to know the experts beforehand. You can ask the model first. Say, list the top researchers, frameworks, and case studies on team innovation. Include both academic sources and real-world examples from companies known for innovation. The model will give you names and concepts. Then you feed those back into a new prompt and say, using these sources, synthesize an original framework that addresses the gaps in current thinking on team innovation. Make it practical and specific to a mid-sized technology company. You've just guided the model from shallow to deep. The key insight here is that the model has access to a huge range of knowledge. But it won't automatically give you the best knowledge unless you ask for it. If you're vague, it gives you vague. If you're specific, it gives you specific. If you point it toward expertise, it pulls from expertise. It's like having access to a massive library but only being able to read what you request. If you ask for a book about leadership, you'll get something random from the middle shelf. If you ask for the 3 most influential books on adaptive leadership written in the past decade, you'll get something better. Here's another example. Let's say you want to understand black holes. If you ask, explain black holes, you'll get a surface-level explanation. Fine for casual curiosity, but not useful if you actually want to understand the physics. Instead, you could ask, list the top 5 physicists and research papers on black holes from the past 10 years. Include both theoretical work and observational findings. The model gives you names. Then you say, using insights from these researchers, explain the current scientific understanding of black holes, including areas of consensus and areas of ongoing debate. Make it accessible but don't oversimplify. See the difference? You're steering the model toward the best available knowledge instead of accepting the average. Here's the 7-day experiment for Tool 4. Day 1. Ask the model a broad question and note how generic the answer is. Something like, how do I improve my productivity, or how do I learn faster? Day 2. Ask the model to list experts or frameworks on that topic. Get specific names, book titles, research papers. Day 3. Rewrite your question to reference those experts and compare the outputs. Notice the increase in depth. Day 4. Ask the model to combine ideas from multiple experts into a new framework. Something it hasn't just copied from one source. Day 5. Test that framework on a real problem you're facing. Does it actually work? Day 6. Ask the model to critique its own framework and suggest improvements. What's missing? What assumptions does it make? Day 7. Reflect on how steering toward expertise changed the quality of the output. Write it down. The failure mode here is accepting the first answer. Don't push. Ask for depth. Ask for examples. Ask for counterarguments. Ask for edge cases. Treat the model like a research partner, not a vending machine. The more you push, the better it gets. Tool 5. Verify everything. AI will confidently tell you things that are completely wrong. It'll cite studies that don't exist. It'll give you statistics that sound plausible but have no basis in reality. It'll make up quotes. It'll misattribute ideas. And it'll do this with the same tone and confidence it uses when it's correct. That's because the model doesn't know when it's wrong. It's generating probabilities, not retrieving facts. This is the part where most people get burned. They trust the output because it sounds smart. The model uses proper grammar. It structures arguments well. It references concepts that seem legitimate. They don't verify. And then they repeat false information or make decisions based on bad data. Here's the rule. Don't just consume AI outputs. Critique them. Verify them. Push back on them. Treat every answer as a draft, not a final product. There are 5 ways I verify outputs: assumptions, sources, counter-evidence, auditing, and cross-model verification. Assumptions. I ask the model to list every assumption it made while generating the answer. Then I ask it to rank those assumptions by confidence. This reveals where the model is guessing versus where it's pulling from solid patterns. If an assumption is weak, I can correct it or ask the model to try again with different assumptions. For example, if the model says most people prefer morning workouts, I'll ask, what assumptions did you make about workout preferences? The model might reveal it's assuming a general population without accounting for shift workers, parents with young children, or people in different time zones. Once I see the assumption, I can refine the prompt. Sources. I ask the model to cite 2 independent sources for each major claim. I want titles, authors, and direct quotes if possible. Then I check those sources myself. Sometimes the model makes up sources. The title sounds real, but if you search for it, it doesn't exist. Sometimes it misinterprets sources. It pulls a quote out of context or attributes a claim to the wrong study. Either way, I don't trust the answer until I've verified the scaffolding behind it. Counter-evidence. I ask the model to find one credible source that disagrees with its answer. This forces it to consider alternative perspectives. If the model can't find any counter-evidence, that's a red flag. It might mean the claim is too vague or too widely accepted to have meaningful opposition. Or it might mean the model is overfitting to one viewpoint. Good thinking includes tension. If there's no disagreement, there's probably no depth. Auditing. If the output includes numbers, I ask the model to recompute every figure and show its math or code. You'd be surprised how often the numbers change when you make the model slow down and audit itself. It'll catch errors in logic or assumptions that weren't obvious in the first pass. For example, if the model says you'll save 30% by switching to this approach, I'll ask, show me the calculation that led to 30%. Include all assumptions about current costs and projected costs. Sometimes the number holds up. Sometimes it doesn't. Cross-model verification. This is my favorite technique. I run the same prompt in multiple models. ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, whatever I have access to. Then I compare the outputs. If they all agree, I'm more confident the answer is solid. If they disagree, I dig deeper to understand why. Sometimes I'll take the output from one model and feed it to another with a prompt like, critique this answer and tell me what's wrong with it or what's missing. That surfaces blind spots. Different models have different training data and different strengths. Using multiple models is like getting a second opinion from a different doctor. These techniques take extra time. You can't just type a prompt and walk away. But they are worth it. Because the cost of acting on bad information is way higher than the cost of verifying good information. If you make a business decision based on a fake statistic, that's expensive. If you repeat misinformation to your team, that's damaging. If you build a strategy on flawed assumptions, you waste weeks. Verification is cheap insurance. Here's the 7-day experiment for Tool 5. Day 1. Ask the model a factual question and accept the answer at face value. Something like, what percentage of small businesses fail in the first 5 years? Day 2. Ask the same question and request sources. Verify those sources. Do they exist? Do they actually say what the model claims? Day 3. Ask the model to list its assumptions and rank them by confidence. See what it reveals. Day 4. Ask for counter evidence and see if the model can find credible disagreement. Day 5. If the output has numbers, ask the model to audit its math. Make it show every step. Day 6. Run the same prompt in a different model and compare outputs. Where do they agree? Where do they differ? Day 7. Reflect on how often the model was wrong or incomplete without verification. Write down what you learned about trust and skepticism. The failure mode here is blind trust. The model sounds confident. It uses complete sentences. It structures arguments well. But confidence is not the same as accuracy. Always verify. Always push back. Always test. Tool 6. Develop taste. Most people use AI like a vending machine. They type a prompt, grab the output, and move on. The problem is, everyone else is doing the same thing. So everyone's outputs start to sound identical. Generic. Flat. Obvious. The same corporate buzzwords. The same empty phrases. The same structure. If you want your work to stand out, you need to develop taste. You need to learn how to recognize when an output is good versus when it's mediocre. And you need to know how to push the model until it gives you something worth using. I use a framework called Ocean to evaluate outputs. Original, concrete, evident, assertive, narrative. Original means the output contains a non-obvious idea. If the answer is something anyone could have said, it's not original. Push the model. Ask for 3 angles no one else has considered. Ask it to label one as risky and recommend the one it thinks is best. Force it to go beyond the defaults. For example, if you're asking for marketing ideas and the model says post on social media and run ads, that's not original. Everyone does that. Push it. Say, give me 3 marketing approaches that most competitors in this space aren't using. For each one, explain why it might work and what the risk is. Concrete means the output includes names, examples, and numbers. Vague advice is useless. If the model says focus on customer feedback, that's not concrete. If it says run a 10-question survey with your top 20 customers this week and look for patterns in responses about feature X, that's concrete. Always ask for specifics. Don't accept abstract principles without examples. Evident means the reasoning is visible. You should be able to see how the model arrived at its conclusion. If the output jumps to an answer without showing its work, ask it to break down the logic in 3 bullets. Make it explain itself. For example, if the model recommends a specific strategy, ask what evidence supports this recommendation? What are the underlying assumptions? If the model can't explain its reasoning, the recommendation is probably weak. Assertive means the output takes a stance. Weak outputs hedge. They say it depends or you could try this or that. Strong outputs pick a side and defend it. If the model won't commit, push it. Say, don't tell me what I want to hear. Don't hedge. Pick a position, state your thesis clearly, and defend it. Then address the best counterargument to your position. This forces the model to think like an expert instead of a cautious consultant. Narrative means the output has a structure. It flows. It tells a story. A good answer has a hook, a problem, an insight, proof, and a path forward. If the output is just a list of disconnected points, ask the model to rewrite it as a story. Say, restructure this as a narrative. Start with the problem, build tension, introduce the insight, provide evidence, and end with a clear action. Good thinking has shape. When you apply Ocean to every output, you stop accepting mediocrity. You train yourself to recognize quality. And over time, your prompts get sharper because you know what you're aiming for. You don't just ask for ideas. You ask for original, concrete, evidence-based, assertive ideas structured as a narrative. The model rises to meet that standard. Here's the 7-day experiment for Tool 6. Day 1. Generate an output and evaluate it using Ocean. Note what's missing. Be specific. Day 2. Focus on originality and push the model for non-obvious ideas. Ask for angles others haven't considered. Day 3. Focus on concreteness and ask for examples and numbers. Make everything specific. Day 4. Focus on evidence and make the model show its reasoning. No leaps. Day 5. Focus on assertiveness and force the model to take a stance. No hedging. Day 6. Focus on narrative and ask the model to restructure the output as a story. Day 7. Generate a new output and apply all 5 criteria at once. Compare it to Day 1's output. The difference should be dramatic. The failure mode here is settling for the first draft. Don't. The first draft is rarely the best draft. Push the model. Iterate. Develop taste. Your outputs should sound like you, not like everyone else. They should reflect your thinking, your standards, your voice. The 2-minute version. You've just learned 6 tools. Here's what to do today if you only have 2 minutes. 1. Pick one AI model and commit to using it for 30 days. Stop hopping between tools. Go deep. 2. Write one prompt using AIM. Actor, input, mission. Tell the model who it is, give it context, and state exactly what you want. 3. Add context using map. Memory, assets, actions, prompt. Don't assume the model knows what you're talking about. Give it the full picture. 4. When the output is weak, debug your thinking. Use chain of thought, verifier, or refinement patterns to iterate. Don't blame the model. Fix the prompt. 5. Steer the model toward experts. Don't accept generic answers. Ask for depth. Reference specific researchers, frameworks, or case studies. 6. Verify everything. Don't trust the model just because it sounds confident. Check assumptions, sources, and counter evidence. That's it. Those 6 actions will put you ahead of 99% of people using AI. If you do them consistently for 30 days, you'll be fluent. You'll write prompts that produce expert-level outputs. You'll recognize quality when you see it. And you'll know exactly how to push the model when it falls short. The 7-day Rewire Plan. Here's your roadmap for the first week. 7 days, 7 experiments. Each one builds on the last. Day 1. Pick your model. Spend 15 minutes exploring its interface. Ask it 3 questions about topics you already understand. Note how it responds. Is it clear? Does it hedge? Does it give examples? Day 2. Write one prompt using AIM. Actor, input, mission. Compare the output to a vague prompt on the same topic. Notice the difference in quality. Day 3. Add context using map. Attach a file, reference a previous conversation, or enable an action like web search. See how the output improves when you give the model more to work with. Day 4. Debug a weak output. Use the chain of thought pattern and ask the model to show its reasoning. Identify where it went wrong and correct it. Day 5. Steer toward experts. Ask the model to list experts on a topic you care about. Then reference those experts in a new prompt and compare the depth of the output. Day 6. Verify an output. Ask for sources, assumptions, and counter evidence. Check the model's claims. See how often it's wrong or incomplete. Day 7. Evaluate an output using Ocean. Push for originality, concreteness, evidence, assertiveness, and narrative. Don't settle for the first draft. This is exactly what the toolkit is for. You don't need to memorize this. Just download the toolkit from the description. It has the full 7-day plan, all the frameworks, all the prompts, and a simple tracking method so you can measure your progress. Keep listening now. You can use the checklist later when you're ready to take action. Putting it all together, your 30-day transformation. Let me paint a picture of what your AI fluency journey actually looks like over 30 days. Week 1 is about foundation. You're picking your model. You're learning AI. You're adding context with map. Every prompt feels deliberate. You're thinking through actor, input, mission before you type. It's slow at first. That's fine. You're building muscle memory. By the end of week 1, you'll notice something. Your prompts are getting shorter because you're getting clearer. You're not over-explaining. You're not hedging. You're giving the model exactly what it needs and nothing more. That's fluency starting to build. Week 2 is about iteration. You're using the debugging patterns. Chain of thought when the output is off. Verifier when you're not sure what information is missing. Refinement when you can't articulate what you want. You're starting to recognize patterns in how the model responds. You can predict when it's going to give you something generic versus something useful. You're developing instincts. By the end of week 2, you'll start to trust yourself. You'll know when to push back on an output. You'll know when to accept it and move on. You're building judgment. Week 3 is about depth. You're steering toward experts. You're asking for sources and frameworks. You're verifying outputs. You're checking assumptions. You're cross-referencing models. You're no longer accepting confident-sounding answers at face value. You're thinking critically. You're treating AI like a research partner, not an oracle. By the end of week 3, you'll notice something powerful. The quality of your questions has improved. You're not just asking AI to solve problems. You're using it to explore ideas, test assumptions, and refine your thinking. That's when AI stops being a tool and starts being a thinking partner. Week 4 is about taste. You're applying Ocean to every output. You're pushing for originality, concreteness, evidence, assertiveness, and narrative. You're not settling for first drafts. You're iterating until the output meets your standard. And your standard is high because you've seen what good looks like. By the end of week 4, here's what changes. Your outputs don't sound like AI anymore. They sound like you. Because you've learned how to steer the model toward your voice, your standards, your thinking. That's mastery. And here's the thing most people don't realize. This compounds. The skills you build in week 1 make week 2 easier. The instincts you develop in week 2 make week 3 faster. The judgment you build in week 3 makes week 4 more powerful. It's not linear progress. It's exponential. 30 days from now, you'll be writing prompts that produce expert-level outputs while other people are still typing "write me a blog post" and wondering why the results are mediocre. You'll know how to debug weak outputs in seconds. You'll know how to verify claims without wasting time. You'll know how to develop taste that makes your work stand out. That's the transformation. That's what fluency looks like. And it's available to you starting today. Closing summary. Let's bring this home. You learned that AI is a prediction engine, not a search engine. It generates responses based on probabilities, not facts. That's why vague prompts produce vague outputs. You learned the AIM framework to structure your prompts: actor, input, mission. You learned the MAP framework to build context: memory, assets, actions, prompt. You learned how to debug your thinking by iterating instead of guessing. You learned how to steer the model toward expertise instead of accepting generic answers. You learned how to verify outputs so you don't get fooled by confident nonsense. And you learned how to develop taste using Ocean so your work doesn't sound like everyone else's. The skills you've learned today compound. Every prompt you write, every iteration you push, every judgment you make, you're not just training the model. You're training yourself. You're building fluency. And fluency is what separates people who use AI from people who master it. Most people will listen to this and do nothing. They'll nod along, think it makes sense, and go back to typing one-sentence prompts. Don't be most people. The gap is widening. The people who learn this now are building an advantage that will matter for years. Here's your concrete next step. Download the toolkit. Pick your model. Write one prompt using AIM. That's it. Do that today, and you're already ahead of most people. Do it every day for a week, and you'll be in the top 10%. Do it for 30 days, and you'll be fluent. Thank you for listening. Subscribe, like, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next audiobook. And check out the free toolkit in the description so you don't have to take notes. And share this with one friend who's frustrated with AI or feels like they're falling behind. Once they learn these frameworks, they'll stop wasting time on mediocre outputs and start producing work that actually stands out. AI is not here to replace your work. It's here to amplify it. But only if you learn how to use it well. You just did. Now go build something.